Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming. Tonight's meeting is the monthly session of City Council, December 11th. Calling this meeting to order. Mr. Beckles was unable to make it tonight, so I will take the duties and ask you to please bow your heads. Dear Lord, we thank you for bringing us here tonight. We ask that you be with us as we prepare to celebrate the birth of your Son, Jesus, our Savior. We ask that the decisions that we make tonight are for the betterment of our entire society, our entire town, our state, and our world. We ask that you be ever present with us and that we act in a manner that is always pleasing in your sight. We thank you for listening to our prayer. Amen. Amen. Roll call. Let the record reflect that all are present. I need a motion for the approval of the agenda, please.
So moved.
Mr. Bradley?
Second.
Second, Mr. Adcock. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carries. I now need a motion for the approval of the consent agenda for the items we discussed last week.
So moved.
Mr. Dickinson, second.
Second.
Second, Ms. Malcolm.
Mayor?
Yes.
I wanted to point out that item K,
Yes, sir.
that is not just engineering services. That is the engineering services and the construction costs.
And construction. I have a motion and a second with the change. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Moving to our presentation, I've asked my friend Dessa to come tonight. She's our Director of Workforce Development to tell us a little bit about Walton Works. Ms. Morris?
Thank you. It's nice to be here with just a little bit of notice from, I understand you cannot turn down the mayor's request, especially this time of year when it's iffy if you're going to be on the naughty list or not. But I wanted to tell you just a couple of minutes about what I am doing and ask for your help. I work for the Development Authority of Walton County. I know all of you guys know my boss, Shane Short. While he's doing industrial recruitment, my job is to keep existing industries here and happy and hopefully expanding, just like that is the goal of many of you people in this room and on the city council. So I arrived about a year ago. My task was to do whatever was needed to keep existing industry happy. Well, their first and major issue is workforce development. So I have learned as much as I can about workforce development. I wanted to tell you about our Walton Works program. It is a partnership between the Development Authority, the K through 12 schools in our county, Walton County School District and Social Circle City Schools, Communities and Schools, and Athens Tech. But first, let me start with why. In looking at the numbers, we can see that the fastest growing industry in Walton County is healthcare. Not me. But the next two fastest growing industries are manufacturing and transportation and warehousing. Did you guys know, and I'm sure you do, we have tons of those opportunities here in Walton County, but our high school students seem to have very little knowledge of the opportunities that are here. So my job, among other things, in Walton Works Partnership is to go educate our community about these opportunities. We were able to, just last month, work in each of the 4 public high schools in our community. We did 4 sessions in each high school. We did all the career, technical, agriculture, and education classes in the Walton County School District, and we did it by grade level in the high school at Social Circle High School. We brought in Charles Lawler, the former general manager of Walmart Distribution Center, who now works for McLean Company. We brought him in to give a 30-minute motivational speech about basically, it was packaged very nicely, but it was stay off drugs, clean up your social media, get your high school diploma. You can work right here in our community and make $51,000 a year. That was astounding, even to some of the teachers that heard our message, so it was great. And then from that, where many of you came in, I know Les Russell was there, several folks were here. We broke out into classrooms and facilitated discussions and did activities that carried through on that message. as far as being on time, employability skills such as being on time, punctuality, being able to pass a drug test. So we'll be back in the schools in March, doing the same thing as far as focusing on interviews, resumes, keeping your social media clean, and then we'll be back the end of April to interview high school seniors for actual jobs in our community. So it's part of awareness and education as we work to build their skills to be able to work here. So I wanted to give these, this is our schedule for the year. We need all of your help as we have permission to go into these classes and work towards keeping our existing industry happy, because as you guys know, most everyone here is expanding or talking about expanding, and that's what we need. So, thank you.
Thank you. Now, before are you passing some things out?
That's allowed?
Oh, absolutely. As she's passing these out, does anybody have any questions for Dessa?
It's a great program. Thank you.
As I'm not hearing questions, I do want to mention a couple of things. Her very first employment fair, she had approximately 700 people there to look for jobs. I think it was astounding to all of our employers there. And so she's really done an outstanding job with bringing the employers and the potential employees together. Also, Angela Yarman had come in and spoken about communities and schools just a couple of months ago. She's been working with the team from communities and schools in each of the schools to help spread the word, get her foot in the door. So I'm really glad Shane has brought her on as a part of our team. And I just thank you for all the work you're doing.
Thank you. We reached 2,000 high school students in our county last month, and we'll hit them again with more information in the spring. So, thank you for your
Fantastic.
time.
Thank you, Dessa. Yes, ma'am. Before we move into the public forum, I do have a couple of housekeeping items. Want to mention at the upcoming Mayor's Day on January 27th, two of our council members will have certificates, Certificate of Achievement to Myosha Crawford, and Norman Garrett will get a Certificate of Excellence for the classes that they've been attending and their leadership abilities, and I appreciate both of you. Next, we have our 200th Jubilee celebration this weekend, an open house. That's going to be at the Historic Courthouse on Saturday, and we've moved a portion of that to Sunday, so please keep a look at Facebook or any updates coming out of the city or county for how we may reschedule events due to weather. Next, I did notice Chief Glass in the back. Did Chief step out?
No, he's there. He's still back there.
Chief, wanted to thank you for your service to the city. Chief will be retiring at the end of this month officially, and he's been a good friend of my family's since I was a kid. He's been a very good friend to the city of Monroe since he was a kid. He's been on the force for 25 years and has been our chief for 16 years. And I appreciate your taking us from a ragtag group of guys to a well-trained group of strong men and women. And it just means a lot to us, and I thank you.
Thank you. I sure wasn't expecting that. That's not why I'm here. I'm here to support the two fine folks that are running your public safety right now. That's why I'm here.
Well, thank you. We'll do more celebrating with you, but I at least wanted to acknowledge you, Chief. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Moving into public comments, and thank you, folks, for attending tonight. This is a good crowd. Ms. Malcolm, Peggy Malcolm, regarding the removal of a parking sign in front of her business? Okay, and I'm sorry, Ms. Malcolm, in what business?
I'm Peggy Malcolm. I'm the owner, along with my son Tony, of the Monroe Antique Mall down on South Madison Avenue.
Yes, ma'am.
It's one of the warehouses right before you coming from here, right before you get to the mall. There are, let's see, there's, the first building would be the old Rust and Dust building. The next building is storage. The next building is my building, and then the block building. They're all connected. It's a church and for storage.
Okay.
And several years ago, before I had the business, there was a woodworking shop back of the Rust and Dust business. And the garage across the street was parking junk cars, cars to be repaired, cars with flat tires and everything from his building down. And it was making him, he had trouble getting in and out of his building. Those cars have since been removed. But he had requested a sign from front of my building down for no parking. And the sign is still there, the cars are still moved, and I'd like the signs to be removed because it's just not a problem now.
Okay.
Any questions from,
I
location?
do. Is this on private property or is this,
it's the parking lot in front of the old that little warehouse strip of businesses there. Mine is 530 South Madison.
okay.
At the corner of Davis Street, there's a warehouse.
Yes, ma'am.
And then there's a lot, and then the next building would be that first building, and then all the other buildings are connected.
Okay.
Separate businesses, but they're connected.
We'll take a look into that. And if you would, could you write your phone number in here for me? And I can stay in touch with you and let you know. Because if it's on private property, there's probably not a lot we can do, but if
It's not private. Harry Arnold owns those buildings, and I rent from him, but it's the parking lot in front of my building, the parking area. It's not like it's a person's.
We'll look into it. Would you like us to stay in touch with you?
Okay,
You don't have to put your name out for public record, but you can write it here and I
Okay.
can be in touch. Thank you. Yes, ma'am. I appreciate your coming tonight. Okay, now, moving into the public hearing for a rezone at 215 Breedlove Drive. Mr. Stone.
Yes, the applicant, 215 Breedlove Drive. This project consists of 175.10 feet of road frontage on Breedlove Drive. The property consists of 4.3 acres. The recommendation of the code department is for approval. The property is presently rezoned R1, M1, and B3. The requested zoning is classification is B3. The requested zoning will permit a use that is suitable in view of the use and development of the adjacent nearby property. The change of zoning will not adversely affect the existing and adjacent property. The subject property does have restricted economic use as currently zoned. The change of zoning will not cause any excessive or burdensome use of existing streets, transportation facilities, utilities, or schools. The future land use indicates the property should be residential.
Okay. Are there any questions for Mr. Stone? Any comments? I'll declare this portion of the meeting open for the purpose of public. Is the applicant here? You want to step up, Mr. Purvis? Would you like to add anything, make any comments?
Yeah, information we'll look at when we talk about it. A lot of this is in your
Thank you.
original application, but some of this is not. So a little bit of background, this property has been zoned M1 and B3 for many years, which we could move forward with a storage project on that portion of the land as is, I believe. But these split zonings are undesirable, and this is something we did recently, a few years ago. We cleaned up the split zoning that Hal Breedlove had out where Panera was, and got rid of the M1, B3 split, and just cleaned it up and went to B3. So the goal here is we purchased a little bit of land. Obviously, that's the only portion. The orange highlighted colored portion is the only thing we're trying to effectively change the use of. The rezone would clean it all up, but we purchased that from Harry Arnold because it's on our side of the creek, It's majority floodplain. As you see, very little building will even be done on it, but it kind of helped our project make sense from a layout standpoint. I've included a flood study. Mountain Creek has been fully studied, and you can see that my land is really out of the flood. The bank, our topography is pretty much level with the shopping center, and it continues at that level until it gets to a point, and then it really drops off, and that's where all the floodplain is. And on the other side of the creek that Harry still owns, which may be residential one day, I would say the first 300 or 400 feet is in the flood. So therefore, there's really a big buffer, and to me, it makes more sense that the change in zoning be on one side of the creek or the other. I don't see, if we're unsuccessful tonight, I do not see, in my opinion, someone coming in and wanting to do something residential on this orange highlighted section that we now own. One concern the Planning Commission had, Mr. Camp had, was he asked, was there any other driveways, commercial driveways on Breedlove Drive? And there are a couple, obviously the shopping center and then the gas station on the corner, the bank, but also we're not actually going to cut a new driveway. We've worked out a deal with Mr. Harris, who owns the shopping center, to share his existing driveway, which should help as far as disturbing the land. And, his concern was that it would just be an eyesore. Just so you know, we do have landscape buffers in our project. The last picture shows what, if you see anything from Breedlove Drive, there's going to be a detention pond in front, a landscape buffer. But if you were to see anything, you'd probably see something like that. I mean, our plan is a Class A, climate-controlled, self-storage project. There's very little of that available in Monroe today. And so that's basically it in a nutshell. Happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Mr. Purvis?
I just have one, and that is because of the fact that when you turn off of Spring and head up Breedlove, the majority of all of that property is, aside from this, residential or potential residential. And while I know that what you're proposing in the mini warehouses is a low-impact, passive type of B3 business, if you were not to do that, other B3 businesses could be of a much higher impact on that area. And that's my only concern.
Sure.
And I do know that it is currently M1, and it could be even more substantially impactful down the road.
I totally can understand that. I think that that's all the more reason to rezone it, to allow this project, because, currently under M1 or B3, like you said, a lot of different uses could be there. We're going to share a driveway. Therefore, we're not going to impact there's going to be a landscape buffer off of Breedlove. Hopefully, you won't even hardly see it. But I think especially sharing the driveway with Mr. Harris, he wants this project to go through. He's actually got plans. If you walk out of Walton 24, if you're worked out and you're walking out and you turn right, there's the corner of his project is undeveloped, and he's got a rendering showing that he could expand his shopping center, and some traffic would probably route around his building, which is pretty unsightly from the rear. This is not your ideal storage location. It's probably marginal as far as the location goes. It's not very visible. But, so he's on board. He thinks it's a great compliment to his project just to have more eyes on his shopping center, which is struggling. We may even lease the end cap of his center, which has been vacant for probably 10 years. If we do that, we're not even going to have to build an office on the project. We'll just enter through the front, walk out the back, walk into the storage. That's all kind of up in the air. And this is not something that we're going to start tomorrow. I'm not just flush with the capital to do it, but I think we can definitely get it done.
Okay. Anything else, Larry? Anyone else here to speak in favor of the project? Do we have anyone here to speak against the project? Hearing none, I'll declare this portion of the meeting closed, and we'll revisit that in just a few minutes.
Mayor, I move that we approve the zoning as requested.
We'll be there in just a second.
Oh, I thought you, oh, that's right, you gotta go.
Yeah, well, it's the new way.
I got it.
Moving to the rezone of 1600 East Church Street.
Yes, for your consideration, Mayor and Council, the applicant requests to rezone for the property located at 1600 East Church Street. The property has approximately 794.6 foot of road frontage on East Church Street. The property consists of 43.42 acres. They're requesting to build 122 homes. The recommendation of the code department is approved with recommended conditions. They don't have those posted yet, but the conditions would be an HOA recorded with the plat, side setbacks of 5 foot, sod the entire lots that are 4,500 or less, and over 4,500 would be to the front to the rear of the building. The property is presently zoned PCD. The request is to rezone to a PRD. The requested zoning will permit a use that is suitable in the view of the use and the development of the adjacent and nearby property. The change of zoning will not adversely affect the existing and adjacent property. The subject property does have restricted economic use as currently zoned. The change of zoning will not cause any excessive or burdensome use of existing streets, transportation facilities, utilities, or schools. The future land use plan does indicate that this should be residential.
Are there any questions for Mr. Stone, or any comments?
I do have a couple of questions, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Stone, first question is on item G, the change of zoning will not cause an excessive or burdensome use of existing street, transportation facilities, utilities, and schools. As I understand this proposal, we're talking 122 houses. Each house has two parking spaces, so 2 cars, plus 50-something cars in the common area. And I'm just curious as to how we came to a conclusion that dumping 300 more cars out onto that street where there's a church, a school, another major subdivision already under development, how that doesn't create a congestion problem. If you could address that.
Well, I mean, we do recognize it will add additional traffic, obviously. He does put A-cell and D-cell lanes as part of his development. If any more development continues down Church Street, we do see that the additional traffic would have to be addressed with future turning lanes, et cetera, where we do have issues on Church Street. So in the future, that could be an issue, obviously.
Okay. I'm sure you have another question?
The other question was the item where, which is if the subject property has restricted economic use as currently zoned. As I read the application, it says that the value of the property is estimated. There's no real data to back it up, but the current estimated value is almost $3.5 million. How is that a restricted economic value? How'd you come to that conclusion?
Well, I mean, I guess from that viewpoint, it's not that restricted. It is an economic value to the development, the way it's currently zoned.
Okay. Those are all my questions, Mr.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments? I believe the applicant is here, correct? Would you like to come up and address us, please? And to make it all official, I'll declare this portion of the meeting open.
Thank you.
Miss
Thank you,
Debbie
Council.
Getting on me later.
Thank you, Council. My name is Stephen Giles. I'm here on KFB Enterprises, Inc. We are the owner of the subject property known as 1600 East Church Street, formerly known as Brooklyn Commons, and we are which we have subsequently renamed Charleston Manor. We are here requesting a rezoning from a planned commercial development to a planned residential development. In large part, to answer your question, is the commercial viability of the commercial space along East Church Street. We believe, based on conversations with other developers, traffic counts, patterns, that at this time, the best interest of this property as well as the community as a whole would be served on a residential basis. Additionally, based on the planned commercial development zoning, we are unable to build out one piece without building out the other. So they are tied together. That is the economic impact on the development itself. In looking at this subdivision, we are not requesting any changes to the infrastructure. Rather, all of the infrastructure that's in place, the streets and everything else, would remain the same. What we are proposing is, and I believe you guys have this in front of you, Dan, and I have a few people here with me. Dan is the engineer that's been working with us. I've got Seth Yerman here with LGI Homes, as well as Christian Witter.
Which one are the two?
We'll hand this out, yeah. So we're going to hand out a sheet to allow you to see what the original approval was back, I believe, in 2006, and the changes that we're making now, or proposing to make, that you'll be able to see the differences. And I've got it up here on the sheet, so while we're talking through it, we can go through this. What you see up on the screen is what we're proposing with, and I apologize, you can't see this, but right here, this is the northernmost portion of the subdivision, where here previously this was all commercial, as well as on this top side, the northeastern side. We are proposing that all be rezoned to single-family residential. In addition to this middle, right here where the amenities are, that was previously a commercial lot. So we have replaced all of the commercial with some single-family, and then also put in a nice amenity package to include a clubhouse, a pool, tennis courts, pickleball court, half basketball court, and these three kind of circles here are playground for the subdivision. And to show, kind of highlight the difference between what the original was and what we have done, here you can see on this slide where what is in yellow is what was the original. So the northeasternmost portion up here was commercial, and the gray was, all of that was commercial. And then you can see actually in the yellow behind it with the A and the E and the C, all of that was previously approved for townhomes. As part of our application, we are also requesting that this be rezoned single-family to fit with the rest of the community. So everything behind that, or south of the Village Green, including the yellow right here, everything south of that, structurally remains the same. So we're not requesting any amendments. So if you come down and see to the next slide, here you can see what we are actually changing. The yellow that you see on the screen is where it was previously townhome, except for what you have up top, which is the H's, H1 through H6. That was previously commercial. That will be zoned. We are requesting single-family residential. C23 through A1 was all previously townhome. We are requesting that that be rezoned to single-family residential. So all of these single-family residential lots would be in keeping with the rest of the development as single-family. The total to begin with, as it was originally approved, I believe was 127 with 103 single-family detached homes with 24 townhouses. What we are requesting changes that density really to 122 single-family homes. With that being said, I will pause and see if the council has any questions.
So what are the square footage
On
of
the
these
house-
homes?
on the houses,
And the price range?
They are 1,600 square feet.
Okay.
Is it your intent to do the construction, your company to do the construction, or to sell the lots to contractors?
No, sir, it is our intent to sell it to a single builder who will come in and build out the entire subdivision.
No.
And in which case, in this case, LGI Homes, which is a large regional builder, has come in and currently has the project under contract. And we have partnered together to do the renderings, to do the layout, to show what the subdivision would look like, for they to move forward in building that out.
And so what are the price points on this?
They'd be starting at 210 and then moving up from there.
210,000.
Yes, ma'am.
And you did not bring, you don't have the covenants?
No, ma'am. That was one of the conditions that was put on it at the time of the Planning and Zoning Committee, which the covenants would need to be in place at the same time that the final plat is recorded before we could move forward. So there is a condition that we would not be able to final plat, as I understand it, until the covenants are in place.
And there's a required homeowners association.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Do we have any other questions?
I do.
Yes, sir.
I would very much like to see those covenants and the homeowners association documents before we vote on this. Because I'll just tell you, this is my concern. And I'm not picking on you.
Sure.
I've said this to other folks in your position. What we are trying to do in Monroe is foster quality development for our citizens who are here and citizens who are coming. And folks come before us and they bring these illustrations of houses that they might or might not build, and sometimes what ends up being built doesn't look anything like the pictures that were brought. The site development plan really doesn't address the houses. It addresses topography and streets and sidewalks and lighting and those kind of things, but there's nothing in those documents that really addresses the houses. That's got to be covered by the covenants. And I noticed in what you presented that you say, well, these houses are going to have some hardy plank on them and they're going to have some other materials, but there are no specifications about percentages. There are no actual photographs of real houses that LGI has built. It notes that some of the houses will be accessed from the alleyways on the rear. I need more information about how many, because when this thing was originally designed, the residential concept was for it to be what's called a traditional neighborhood. And I have seen a lot of LGI's houses and developments in other communities around Atlanta, because they're moving into the, what they call the ex-urban area of Atlanta. And I got to tell you, most of the ones I've seen are front-loaded. And I just have some real concerns. And I think we need more information in order to make an intelligent decision. Because once we make it, and once it's done, it's not like we're going backwards.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And if I could speak to that a little bit, and I appreciate your comments and your concerns. And certainly, Mr. Uriman will be able to help me address that as well. But I would like to highlight on here, the original development, as it was approved many years ago, was Brooklyn Commons, and it had very much a front porch community feel, where you had rear entry, and to your point where you were asking about how many were rear entry versus front entry, under the original, there were 107 rear entry lots and 20 front entry. Under the proposed, there are 102 rear entry lots and 20 front entry. So the same number of front entry lots that was proposed originally is the same thing that we are keeping in this current development as the way we have it laid out. The houses that we have shown here on the slide are in keeping with what the architectural style that was intended in the original development with a, like, as I mentioned, a front porch community with a rear entry. The idea was you'd be able to come and sit on the front porch. You've got double-lined sidewalks on either side. You've got trees, so it is a pedestrian-friendly community with lights along the walking path. The idea is that it becomes an active community with people sitting on the front porch, not hiding in their backyard. This is not necessarily the be-all, end-all. This was more of a rendering to give you the look and feel of the style of the houses. Certainly, I understand your concern. Everything we've done is to honor and keep the original intent of the subdivision to make it appealing and attractive to people who are looking for houses in the city of Monroe.
All right. Do you have any idea on the typical house plan that LGI is going to build?
We have.
What's the ratio of the so-called front porch to the square footage of the whole?
Sure. And I'd like to invite Mr. Yarman up to speak to that.
Good evening. Thanks for having us here. Repeat your question again. Let me make sure I
What,
fully understand it.
if you know, what would be the ratio of the square footage of these front porches on your typical house plan to the square footage of the house?
The front porch square
Yes.
footage to
In other
the,
words, a porch can be a tiny
Sure.
little thing, or it
Yep.
can be an actual traditional porch.
right, a full
They're
front.
not the same thing.
No, they're not. I mean, ratio right now, we're considering first level and second level porches on some of the units. So, going, probably extending out 10 feet. And the width of the house is going to be between 35 and 45 feet, which is our typical house width to fit on these lots. So, yeah,
So
accommodating porches.
would you be willing to put those specifications in writing as a condition of the development, along with the materials?
Sure.
Architectural shingles, 7 and 12 roofs on the houses, those kind of things?
We would take suggestions from what you're looking for on it. Yeah.
Would you be willing to do it?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay.
If we got a good vision from y'all on what you did, we'd absolutely put it in writing.
Because my personal feeling is we've got to have that.
Sure.
We want quality and something that, folks are going to be very, very happy with, and the city's going to be very proud of.
Indeed.
So
Agreed.
we're very pro-development, but we're pro-good development,
Smart.
quality.
Yeah, quality development. Yes, sir. No, we put it in writing. Sure.
Okay, do we have any other questions or comments at this time? Do we have anyone here to speak in favor of this development? Do we have anyone here who's opposed to the development? I'll declare this portion of the meeting closed. We will revisit this in just a moment. Moving to new business, the rezone of 215 Breedlove Drive. I think I have a motion coming from Mr. Bradley.
Yeah, I would make the motion that we approve the zoning request as presented.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Could I ask that you consider rezone with the condition as long as the warehouses presented be built there? Since if that concept were changed and it became a blanket B3, it could be a much more high-impact business being built there.
My only question for you would be, if we do not rezone it, wouldn't that open it up for even a heavier impact today versus the?
Well, it could, but not, there's 1.4 some odd acres that would not be included in that. It's R1 right now.
Yeah, that's fine. We can make, the motion would be we approve the zoning request as presented with the conceptual plans for self-storage as presented. And if that storage, if the plans for the lot change, then we'd have to come back before us for additional requests.
Right.
Prior to your second, Mr. Rosenthal, can we place that condition?
You certainly can place the condition. Our suggestion would be that you make the condition on uses. So if it's a condition upon the use only being self-storage or climate-controlled self-storage, if you want to make conditions based upon buffers, our suggestion would be that I believe the applicant would probably tell you that while they have a conceptual plan, engineering may render the building locations to change. So if you condition it just upon the rendering itself, it would necessitate them coming back before you for what we would consider to be pretty minor engineering changes. So if you're going to place conditions, our suggestion would be that they be conditions of uses, conditions of different buffers, those types of metrics that will give not only the applicant, but also the code office direction on what the limitations are, but not tie it to a singular drawing.
Thank you. Do you mind amending your,
Thought that's what I said, we amended the use of climate control self-storage.
that works? Do I have a second?
Can I just verify from the applicant that that's will fit in his plans? Okay.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a second by Ms. Malcolm. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Moving to rezone 1600 East Church Street is just discussed. I'll open the floor to council members for discussion.
Mr. Mayor,
Dickinson?
I want to make a motion to table this matter to give time for the property owners to meet with city planning and the city attorneys to flesh out the documents that are missing, the protective covenants, the homeowners association documents, the design standards that we've discussed, that they say they're amenable to doing. I think we need all of that in front of us in order to intelligently vote on conditions. I don't know how you vote on conditions if you don't have them in writing, have them in the record, and have these other documents that I just think we need to see. And so I would move to table it. I think if we do that until the next meeting, that's certainly enough time to meet and come up with the things that I feel we need to do. That's my motion.
Thank you. I have a motion to table until written conditions are placed, and we'll come back to visit at the next meeting. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Mr. Ross Bradley. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Certificate of Appropriateness Appeal for 600 South Broad Street. Mr. Stone.
Yes, the applicant presented a non-conforming design for a parking lot within the CDO. P&Z denied the application due to non-compliance. The applicant has modified the design and wishes to have the decision overturned based on the new design and any conditions required by the city council. Currently on page 158, in the agenda packet, the parking lot is now, prior to award, it was a gravel parking lot. Now it is proposed as being paved, landscaped, and screened 15 to 20%, and irrigated. So it's our recommendation that this would be, the COA would be approved since it's now in compliance.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Stone? Could I have a motion, please?
Move it be approved.
Motion to approve by Mr. Bradley. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Dickinson. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign, please. Motion carries. Moving to the appointments of our Downtown Development Authority and Convention and Visitors Bureau Authority. We have 3 appointments expiring at the end of this year. First on the list is Mr. Mike Gray. He would like to continue to serve on the DDA and the CVB. I need a motion to reappoint Mr. Gray for a 3-year term to expire on December 31st, 2021.
I'll make that motion, Mr. Mayor.
I have a motion by Mr. Bradley. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Malcolm. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Moving quickly to the second, Ms. Meredith Malcolm, would like to continue to serve on the Downtown Development Authority and Convention and Visitors Bureau Authority. I need a motion to reappoint Ms. Meredith Malcolm for a 3-year term to expire on December 31st, 2021.
So moved.
I have a motion by Mr. Dickinson, a second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Little. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carries. I'm moving quickly to the third. Mr. Charles Sanders would like to continue to serve on the Downtown Development Authority and Convention and Visitors Bureau Authority. I need a motion to reappoint Mr. Charles Sanders for a 3-year term to expire on December 31st, 2021.
So moved.
I have a
Second.
motion by Mr. Dickinson and a second by Ms. Malcolm. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Moving, the next topic, intergovernmental agreement for indigent defense representation. Mr. Probst.
Thank you, Mayor. We talked a little bit more about this last week, but essentially this is an intergovernmental agreement with the Alcovy Judicial Circuit Public Defender's Office for indigent defense representation in our municipal court. This gets us a higher level of indigent defense representation in our court for the fair price of $300 a month. Be happy to entertain any questions on this matter.
Not too shabby. Any questions? We'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve the agreement.
Motion to approve by Mr. Dickinson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Adcock. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Resolution authorizing the Urban Redevelopment Agency. Mr. Rosenthal.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a resolution that we discussed last week. I'll be happy to answer any questions. As you know, this is to allow us to really start using our urban redevelopment plan that we passed back in 2008 for financing mechanisms as well as other redevelopment opportunities. This resolution will authorize and turn on the urban redevelopment powers of the city of Monroe and delegate those powers to the DDA to serve as the Urban Redevelopment Agency Board of Commissioners. The resolution that we have here on item number 6 is also connected to the resolution on item number 7 that I'll talk about in a moment. Also, if there's any questions on this, I'll be happy to answer them. But also, Tommy Ratchford is here in the audience tonight. He is with Roger Murray's office at Murray Barnes and Fenister, who's helping us on this, and so he's here as well for any questions. This is a resolution authorizing the Urban Redevelopment Agency of the City of Monroe, Georgia to exercise powers under the Urban Redevelopment Law, whereas the Urban Redevelopment Law of the State of Georgia created in the City of Monroe a public body corporate and politic to be known as the Urban Redevelopment Agency of the City of Monroe, Georgia, whereas the Urban Redevelopment Law allows the agency to exercise the urban redevelopment project powers provided that the city determines that it is in the public interest for the agency to exercise such powers, and whereas the city desires that the agency exercise the urban redevelopment project powers. Now therefore be it resolved by the City Council of the City of Monroe as follows. Number 1, findings. Excuse me. It is hereby found, determined, and declared that it is in the public interest for the agency to exercise the urban redevelopment project powers. Number 2, election. The agency is hereby activated to the extent required by the urban redevelopment law. The city hereby elects to have the agency exercise the urban redevelopment project powers. The city reserves the right to revoke such election, provided that the revocation does not impair any of the agency's contracts. Number 3, agency composition. The Board of Commissioners of the agency shall have the same number of commissioners as there are members of the Downtown Development Authority of the City of Monroe. The terms of office of the commissioners shall be coterminous with the authority members' terms of office if the members of the authority are appointed as the commissioners of the agency, and 3 years if the members of the authority are not appointed as the commissioners of the agency. Provided, however, in the case of a non-authority board, the terms of office for initial commissioners shall be staggered so that not more than 3 terms expire on the same date. Number 4, agency members and officers. The mayor, with the advice and consent of the city council, hereby appoints the members of the authority as the commissioners of the Board of Commissioners of the agency. The mayor, with the advice and consent of the city council, hereby appoints the chairman of the authority as the chairman of the agency and the vice chairman of the authority as the vice chairman of the agency. The Board of Commissioners here and before appointed shall organize itself, carry out its duties and responsibilities, and exercise its powers and prerogatives in accordance with the terms and provisions of the urban redevelopment law as it now exists and as it might hereafter be amended or modified. A copy of this resolution is on file with the city clerk and shall serve as a certificate of appointment required by the urban redevelopment law. Number 5, effective date. This resolution shall be effective immediately upon its adoption Number 6, repeal all resolutions or ordinance in conflict herewith. This resolution are hereby repealed. That is the resolution this 11th day of December, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenthal. Are there any questions or comments? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll offer a motion to approve.
Thank you. I have a motion by Ms. Malcolm. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Crawford. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign.
I oppose.
I have one opposed, and motion carries. Moving to the resolution of Urban Development Plan Amendment, Mr. Rosenthal.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, as we discussed last week, this is an amendment to our 2008 redevelopment plan. It adds specifically that the authorities of the Urban Redevelopment Agency will be vested and held by the DDA Board, serving as the Urban Redevelopment Agency on behalf of the City of Monroe. It also adds a Chapter 6 to the plan, which lays out various potential projects and specific projects. And specifically, this amendment adds the project that we are all looking forward to, which is the renovation, repurposing, and infill development of the Walton Plaza Shopping Center to serve as a new location for our Monroe Police Department and our Monroe Municipal Court. I'll be happy to answer any questions again. Also, Mr. Ratchford is here as well for any questions. This is a resolution approving an amendment of the redevelopment plan of the City of Monroe, whereas the City Council of the City of Monroe adopted an ordinance on July 8, 2008, finding that one or more slum areas, now known as pockets of blight, exist in the city, and that the rehabilitation, conservation, or redevelopment, or a combination thereof of such area or areas is necessary in the interest of the public health, safety, morals, or welfare of the residents of the city. And they also determined that a certain area within the city is a slum area and designated the area as appropriate for an urban redevelopment project, and approving the city's 2008 redevelopment plan, the original plan, all in accordance with the urban redevelopment law of the state of Georgia. Whereas the city has determined that it should amend the original plan in order to include a description of an urban redevelopment project under consideration by the city. All is more fully set forth in the 2018 plan amendment, which is attached here to as Exhibit A. And whereas the urban redevelopment law provides that the city shall not approve an urban redevelopment plan or a substantial modification thereof or an amendment thereto for an urban redevelopment area unless the city council has made the area findings and designation, held a public hearing on the urban redevelopment plan or substantial modification thereof or amendment thereto, after a public notice thereof is published in a newspaper having general circulation in the area of operation of the city, and made certain additional findings. And whereas the city published the notice and held the public hearing last week as required by the urban redevelopment law, now therefore be it resolved by the council of the city of Monroe, Georgia as follows. Number 1, findings and designations. The prerequisite finding and the area finding and designation are hereby ratified and affirmed. It is hereby found, determined, and declared that no families will be displaced from the area, and therefore no method for relocation of such families need be provided. The amendment conforms to the general plan of the city as a whole. The amendment will afford maximum opportunity consistent with the sound needs of the city as a whole for the rehabilitation and redevelopment of the area by private enterprise, and the amendment constitutes an appropriate part of the city's workable program for utilizing appropriate private and public resources to eliminate and prevent the impairment of the sound growth of the city and to encourage needed urban rehabilitation, all is set forth in the urban redevelopment law. Number 2, approval of the amendment of the project. The amendment and the project are hereby approved. Number 3, effective date. This resolution shall be effective immediately upon its adoption. Number 4, repeal. All resolutions or ordinance in conflict with this resolution are hereby repealed. That is the resolution this 11th day of December, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenthal. Are there any questions or comments? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
I have a motion by Mr. Ross Bradley. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Adcock. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
I oppose.
With one opposition, motion carries. Resolution for the adoption of language access plan, Mr. Rosenthal.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a resolution on the adoption of language access plan, whereas the City of Monroe wishes to be in accordance with Title VI non-discrimination laws regarding the provision of appropriate access to services and activities provided by federal agencies and recipients of federal assistance, and whereas the City of Monroe is in receipt of HUD funding through the Community Development Block Grant Program, and whereas the Georgia Department of Community Affairs has encouraged and provided guidance for the adoption of a language access plan for limited English-speaking persons, let it therefore be resolved that the City of Monroe has prepared and is adopting its 2018 Language Access Plan related to the CDBG funding of sewer rehabilitation. Let it be resolved that Debbie Crow has been named in the LAP as the Language Access Plan Coordinator. Let it be resolved that the Language Access Plan will be updated as new census data regarding LEPs is presented and/or a new CDBG or other federal grant is awarded, and requires that the Language Access Plan be updated or revised. So resolved this 11th day of December, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenthal. Are there any questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to adopt the resolution.
I have a motion on the floor by Mr. Adcock. Second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Ross Bradley. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Approval of the 2019 budget resolution, Mr. Rosenthal.
I'll ask if Mr. Probst needs to provide anything on this before I read the resolution.
Only if you have questions regarding the budget after discussion from last week. All right.
Think you're good to go?
This is a resolution adopting the 2019 budget for the City of Monroe, Georgia, appropriating amounts as shown in each budget as expenditures and adopting the revenue projections and prohibiting expenditures to exceed appropriations. Now therefore be it resolved by the Mayor and the City Council of the City of Monroe, Georgia as follows. Whereas for the purpose of financing the conduct of affairs of the City of Monroe during the fiscal year beginning January 1, 2019 and ending December 31, 2019, the budget of the city's revenues and expenditures for such period as prepared and submitted to the City Council by the City Administrator and so approved by the Mayor and City Council. Whereas the amounts listed are the appropriations so authorized by the Mayor and City Council and are approved for the amounts and purpose indicated. And whereas any pay, classification, or job description changes contained and funded herein, the budget are approved for the amounts and purposes indicated. And whereas any organizational chart changes or descriptions contained herein within the budget are approved as indicated, whereas in the rates listed are so authorized by the Mayor and City Council and are approved for the amounts and purposes indicated. Whereas a budget amendment is considered any action of the Mayor and City Council to purchase items not included in original budgeted figures. Be it further resolved that the expenditures shall not exceed the appropriations authorized by this budget, and that the expenditures for the fiscal year shall not exceed funding as available. So adopted by the Mayor and Council this 11th day of December 2018.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenthal. Are there any questions or comments?
I have a quick question. That $20 fee that y'all were talking about implementing for the TB cable, is that being put in the budget?
Yes, sir, that was put in the budget after the last budget meetings and from last week's discussions.
Any other comments, questions? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to
Move to
approve the
adopt.
2019 budget resolution.
I have a motion on the floor by Mr. Little, and I'm going
Second.
to give you the second, Mr. Dickinson.
Yes, sir.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign.
I oppose.
Motion carries with one opposition. Moving to adopt the 2019 council meeting schedule, Mr. Probst.
As discussed last week, it's a pretty standard calendar. We're moving back the January meeting due to that following on January 1st, the first Tuesday, and the one meeting in July.
Thank you. There any questions? I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
A motion by Ms. Malcolm. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Adcock. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Surplus and sale of 11 thousandths of an acre at 420 North Broad Street intersection. Mr. Probst.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm sorry I couldn't get this prepared in time for last week, but after several meetings with the Georgia Department of Transportation, we've come to the realization that this project that they have slated for an intersection upgrade, which is really an ADA accessibility intersection upgrade, at North Broad and Marable Streets, both east and west, basically all four corners of that intersection will be done. It does not impact the North Broad LCI project. That's what we were checking on over the last few weeks, and also will not impact the future TAP grant streetscape project that we're working on. But in order for them to complete that project, the upgrade, they need from us 0.011 acres located at 420 North Broad Street that intersects with East Marable. So from you, I would need two separate motions, one to declare as surplus the 0.011 acres located at 420 North Broad Street, and a second motion to authorize the sale of the 0.011 acres located at 420 North Broad Street to the Georgia Department of Transportation in the amount of $500, which is essentially the fair market value that we've come up with.
Are there any questions for Mr. Probst?
Do they need access to any private property or only right away?
They have all of the rest of the property around it taken care of in right-of-way. So I'm not sure that they've had to acquire any other private property other than our portion right there in front of the old waterworks plant. And I spoke with Rodney, and he's okay with any potential utility impairments. We will be keeping an eye on some water mains as the project develops, but he's okay with where it's at.
I need a motion to declare a surplus 11 thousandths of an acre located at 420 North Broad Street.
So moved.
A motion by Mr. Dickinson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Little. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Now, to authorize the sale of the 11 thousandths of an acre located at 420 North Broad Street to the Georgia DOT in the amount of $500. I need a motion, please.
So moved.
Motion by Ross Bradley. Do I have a second?
Second.
And point of clarification, if we could just ask that the motion be amended to authorize the mayor to execute the appropriate deed to transfer that title.
Using those words.
Motion is noted. Do I have a
Second.
second by Mr. Adcock?
Thank you.
Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carries. I now need a motion, please, to adjourn to executive session to discuss a personnel issue.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Bradley and a second by Mr. Larry Bradley, and a second by Ms. Malcolm. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carries.